chance.
What's up, everybody? Episode 13 of the No Chance podcast. As always, your host, Ryan.
And Nate.
We want to give a huge shout out to everybody listening, watching the videos. Anybody that's new, by the way, welcome to episode 13 of
You're
No
only
Chance
13
podcast.
episodes late.
13 episodes late.
It's fine.
It's okay.
We'll forgive it.
You could definitely binge watch the rest. It is
Binge listen.
It's cuddling season. It's cuffing season. Yo, you and your girl, make sure you watch all the previous 12 episodes. Get in there, you know. I'm just playing.
Anyways, on that note,
but we definitely want to give a huge shout out to all the listeners. We just hit about a thousand total plays, which I mean doesn't sound like
more
a
now. I think this morning I checked and it was more.
I think we were at like almost 1,100 the other day when you told me, and I was like, that was like the small goal.
Yeah,
I was like, I want to get to at least 1,000 because 1,000 is an actual reputable number, I think.
But it's still like not really that much.
Oh hell no!
Like,
hey,
listens,
so you made a mix, right?
Yeah.
And you uploaded on SoundCloud. How many listens do you have on that?
I don't know, a few. Like
tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands, like
exactly.
30,000, 50,000.
That's what I'm talking about. Like 1,000 for like 13 tracks isn't a lot.
Yeah.
But for what it is and what we made and the things we talk about and the sort of like effortless sort of communication that we have, it's like it's cool to see 1,000.
Yeah. So shout out to you guys. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. All the comments, all the messages, all the likes, all the subscriptions. We appreciate all that.
Yeah.
So thank you guys.
We're loving the process. We put together these episodes and audio. We do it all by ourselves. So it's really cool to see, people support, the culture. So definitely huge shout out to you guys. This episode, we're gonna be listening to a little bit of what you guys have been saying in terms of we want to hear about individual brands, right? So we definitely talk a lot about Supreme.
More than I think we should.
And it's hard because they are the sort of pinnacle of streetwear. They're doing the best in streetwear at the moment, of course. And we're gonna talk about a little bit of that, about the sort of transition into the early king of streetwear, which was Stussy, which is going to be the topic of today's discussion. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard to get away from a Supreme sometimes, just because
they're the most relevant right now.
Yeah,
and they're the most popular right now.
And every little thing they do is magnified, and news articles and stories are always documenting what they're doing. So it makes sense for us to talk about it, but to steer away from that conversation and sort of dive into something that, is something that's kind of new for us in terms of the research aspect of it, is covering a streetwear brand that was once, well-renowned, probably the most influential and important streetwear brand
ever
in clothing brands in general. It's where a lot of your favorite shop owners and streetwear designers and clothing brand owners came from.
Yeah. And let's talk about that for a little bit. Who started out at Stussy?
So we're going to be talking about Stussy. If you didn't know already, we've probably mentioned it like 4 times. But so Stussy, let's see. Who came from Stussy? I know name-wise, Eddie Cruz.
Who founded Undftd.
Let's see. I have another one here.
James Jebbia, founder of Supreme. That's a big one.
Founder of Union as well. Which I did not know.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Because they have a huge and they go kind of under the radar. In terms of their sort of impact in streetwear. And then, man, I think that's pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, you get like some of the key. And it's this one guy.
Keith.
Keith Hufnagel.
Yeah.
Team rider for Stussy in the early years.
Yep.
And that's a huge one in itself.
Started his own brand, Huff. In case you guys may or may not have heard of that.
Yeah, Keith Hufnagel, of course. Yeah, he's definitely If you didn't know, that is the owner of Huff. But yeah, you can kind of see, and we'll get into the sort of prelude and history of Stussy, but just on sort of a very top level scope of things is just off of those names alone, a lot of the heavyweights in streetwear today sort of gain their influences from the creator himself.
Yeah, and I think looking at these other brands, you can definitely see an influence in terms of like where they draw their inspiration from, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Like whenever I see some stuff from Huff or maybe some Supreme, you know, you can almost see like a direct connection to their time working at Stussy. So yeah.
And I think one of the things we're going to cover is how sort of influences it's kind of general in terms of sort of the influences in streetwear. You know, you have the hip hop. You have skateboarding. You have, you know, just surf
which
culture,
was like huge for Stussy.
So yeah, let's just dive into that now. So, Sean Stussy is his name. Early '80s sort of surfer culture, Lords of Dogtown, all that shit. You know the story. If you're not familiar with it already, just that whole sort of Venice, Santa Monica area being very huge in surf culture and the birth of skateboarding, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about surfing is that when there weren't any swells, that people would go and skate. Yeah. So the two went kind of hand in hand, you know?
Yeah. And what you're basically, as a lot of people call it, surfing on concrete. So that sort of style and individualism sort of transferred from the water to the pavement. And when you get somebody like a Sean Stussy, who at the time was a surfboard shaper for, I don't know the company off the top of my head, but just know that he shaped surfboards and was probably one of the most well-known surfboard shapers at the time. Sort of had his own little, I would call it like a personal brand, essentially, right? Yeah. So you see a certain shape shaped by Sean, and you just say like, oh, that's a Stussy shape. So you already sort of garner that following, that sort of brand mentality before you even have a brand.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole reason why he started doing apparel is because he wanted something to accompany his boards. So he wanted to do something else that he could add on in addition to like his surfboards or whatever he was doing at the time, you know.
And to skateboarders and surfers at that time, a business card didn't mean shit. Like, you know, like it wasn't.
They would
something
crumple it up and throw it away.
You wouldn't think twice about having a business card. So I mean, what's the second best? It's something that you can put on your back. So why not make a T-shirt? You know, if you're a surfer and you're shaping, you're probably creating, you know, these great vinyls and designs and stickers in itself. So that process kind of goes hand in hand with screen printing on a T-shirt. You know.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it's consistent with why the T-shirt was the next step into it.
And mind you, Sean Stussy no longer is with Stussy.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot what year, but it's been like quite a few years. Definitely. Maybe even like decades since he was actually with Stussy.
Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there so everybody knows that, you know, Stussy isn't necessarily...
Just to inform you guys of our sort of where we're going with this.
And that's another thing. I don't think he himself knew that Stussy was going to evolve into this huge, like, pop cultural phenomenon. Yeah. Like, I don't think anyone knew at the time that it was going to be this big.
No way. You got to think, and this just as a side note, you think about anybody that's ever created something that they personally loved and watch it become something that almost, not necessarily overnight, but over a short amount of time becomes such a large success that it's almost scary. Yeah. You know, like, holy shit, these people are freaking out about my little screen print that I thought of in my garage, and I'm making millions of dollars over it. I got to take a step back.
No, yeah, it's definitely overwhelming. Like, the amount of stress I think that goes into that is just crazy. Like,
especially if it's tied to your name or like tied to something that you wanted to create and thought that other people would, and not even necessarily, he didn't do it just because he thought other people would like it. He did it because it was a way to self-promote himself and provide, you know, another piece of collateral to go with this is surfboards. Like, and that always makes me think about Nego when it comes to Bape. You know, like he left at a time where I would almost say was the peak. Like people question the reasons why he left. Yeah. And it's like, you left at like, what, 2000 and maybe after 2010, maybe around there actually, when they were still booming. You know what I mean?
So do you think it has to do with people like them, like Nigo or Sean Stussy, not necessarily liking the direction that the brand is going in terms of like it blowing up and kind of evolving into something else? Or do you think it's that they just kind of had to take a step back because they wanted to focus on other things because like their brands were already established? You know what I'm saying?
I think that second point you just made, I think that applies to Nigo very well in terms of, this has already sort of expanded into something that is exactly where I wanted it to be. I'm sure like we have enough designs and enough creative direction to manage this thing forever, and I can take a step back and work on something that, I love, like which is the human-made stuff.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, it's very tidy, it's very workwear oriented, very like business casual.
Yeah.
And it just shows the progression of a person's life, like when you're younger and like you flex with the Ferraris and the Lambos and the fucking platinum chains and all that shit. Like, what's next? You grow up and you don't wear that shit
Yeah,
anymore.
I think he was just at that point maybe. I mean, this is all speculation. Like, we're all just saying what we think. But I think that he kind of grew out of that phase, Like, he kind of matured and he realized that, okay, maybe it's time to put my focus on something else.
Exactly.
Because maybe he didn't really resonate with that brand anymore.
No, that's actually a really good point. And it just kind of plays into the stuff that we talked about, like when we were kids in 2006, 2007, wearing baggy clothes and cargo shorts. We thought that this was something that we would wear forever. Yeah. But now we don't. Now and what if we started a brand based off how we were feeling in 2007? We probably wouldn't be too into it right now.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to Sean Stussy, like, what do you think?
I think he was the other point that you made. I think it was he believed in something so much. And you got to think about, if you've ever watched Dogtown and Z-Boys, those guys are gnarly. Like, they are, like, fuck everybody else. Like, if you aren't me or you don't like the things that I'm into, then don't even come around me. Yeah. So this guy, like,
which essentially is the attitude that streetwear had at the very beginning.
Which is why he's one of the cultural innovators and pioneers of streetwear. It sort of spawned from this, fuck everybody else, I'm going to make what I like.
I'm going to do my own thing.
But then once it turned into and sort of magnified into the scale of, holy shit, like, people that I don't even like wearing my stuff is wearing my stuff. Like the celebrities, like the same way that Thrasher's being kind of thrown around and sort of hung to dry, essentially. He's probably just like, no, fuck this, man. Like, this turned into something that I would have never expected it to turn into. Yeah. And, I don't care anymore. It's almost like he's disassociating himself with the brand. Yeah. Because of what it's turned into.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that maybe he realized that this brand is no longer what it meant to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it no longer has that meaning for me. Because at the very beginning, like, streetwear was always for outcasts. It was always for people who lived on the fringes of society, like surfers, skaters, people who didn't necessarily fit in. So I think after Stussy became kind of mainstream, I think that's when he kind of realized that, hey, maybe I don't really like the direction that this brand is going, so I'm gonna,
Yeah, and that, like we just said, like, if you were to form a brand based off of how you were thinking when you were 13, and now you're, 35, 40 years old, you don't associate with anything that you thought of when you were 13, unless you truly loved it. And when we were kids, we fed off of trends, so that's not something that we still sort of live by to this day. So I mean, it makes sense to see disassociation with the brand that you had started when you were younger.
Yeah. So moving on to, like, why do you think Stussy has been such a streetwear staple even without Sean Stussy at its helm?
I think it's when you're a pioneer of something, and I think regardless if you don't meet the sort of standards that people expected of you at a certain point, so say like in the early years or like late 80s, early 90s to mid 2000s and that's a long period of time when Stussy was hot and their flagship stores were all over the place and it was really one of the only streetwear brands. Nobody sort of expected anything of it, you know? Yeah. Everything they put out was considered different and new because there was nothing, they didn't ever set a precedent, you know? There was no streetwear precedent before them.
Yeah, so they were essentially, like you said, the originators of streetwear.
Yeah.
So therefore, like, the way that I look at it is that, okay, there's like Levi's.
Yeah.
I know they didn't invent the like denim jeans, but like they were the ones who produced them like on a big enough scale to where they became popular. Yeah. So in that sense, like they'll always be timeless. So do you think the same case is true for Stussy, that they originated streetwear? So like they will always be seen as timeless and held in high regard.
Yeah, they almost are grandfathered into the streetwear game. So they can put out mediocre shit. They can, you know, hop onto any wave, but we're still going to be like, it's fine. You know,
it's Stussy. Like they invented this shit.
We shrug our shoulders to the type of stuff they put out nowadays. And even though it's widely sold in Urban Outfitters, like we just saw today when we visited there.
I don't shop there, by the way. I don't buy anything from there.
I do personally, but if anything, like if we see Stussy being sold at Urban Outfitters, it's not like a, man, Stussy sold the fuck out. Like I'm not wearing Stussy ever again. It's just like it's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the same. It's complete opposite when we look at a brand like 100 or Diamond Supply, you know?
Yeah.
Because they were like not even the stepkids, but the great grandkids to like a Stussy. You know, they learned from the creators that came from Stussy.
Yeah.
So if anything, we look at those second or third tier brands as like, if they sell out, fuck them. We don't like them anymore.
Yeah, we don't hold them in the same high regard that we do with Stussy because essentially they're not, you know, the pioneers of streetwear. You know.
And a good example was like look at something like a Hershey's. Yeah. Right? They don't do anything drastically different at all.
Yeah.
Right? We can have every type of Reese's, every type of chocolate, every sort of gimmick there is, right? And we can eat it for every so long. But when it comes to making a fucking s'mores, we always come to Hershey's. Like, of all the chocolate, you know what I mean? And it doesn't change. It doesn't do anything. They're always the same. You know, no matter what article of clothing they put out, no matter what season, we're okay with it. And it never changes. You know what I mean?
That was a really random analogy.
No, I mean, like it just kind of says timeless, basically. Like they have a sort of, like I said, grandfathered into the streetwear game, and it makes a lot of sense.
They're like Coca-Cola. Like they're an integral part of American like pop culture, like streetwear DNA.
You're telling me that the Hershey's reference is different from the Coca-Cola reference?
No, I said it was a good analogy. I'm just saying like that was a really random one to make. You pulled that one way out of left field. But anyways, yeah, I agree with that. I think that since Stussy is one of the big originators of what we call streetwear today,
definitely,
I think that's why they're so timeless. You know.
Yeah.
Like I was saying earlier, you know, like a Levi's or whatever, like like the Jordan 1, like the first Jordan, always a classic.
Definitely.
Because it was the first one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, Stussy has, you know, continued its longevity. And I also think it has to do with their ability to adapt and change and grow with the times.
Yeah.
As well as stay very true to themselves.
That's a very good point. Like, and if we look at the different sort of eras that Stussy sort of inhabited itself within, you have the 80s, the 90s, and 2000s, all three completely different, you know, eras in itself, you know? So when you look at the 80s if you just look at New York in the 80s, it's just like graffiti and like a lot of culture. Even in the 90s, just a lot of culture. You can see that within, you know, how Stussy sort of moved within that area. You see the most popular probably Stussy item there is the Stussy Tribe International jackets, right? The Letterman jackets.
Yeah, or at least like the most coveted one.
Yeah. The ones that anytime they ever come out, they always sell out. They're always super popular, and people they're just extremely into it because that's almost like the the way that Supreme has the box logo T-shirt, that Letterman jacket is almost like what the brand stands for.
Yeah, it's like quintessential, like Stussy.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, too. I think they're so successful because they pioneered the art of, like, doing exclusive shit.
Yeah,
you know?
They did.
They pioneered what all other brands are doing these days with an exclusive drop that not everybody's going to get their hands on.
Yep.
So, therefore, people are going to want it.
Yeah.
You know?
And they were also the first brand to really do the collaboration. And I don't mean like first like company to do a collaboration. I mean like first streetwear brand to do collaborations with, you know, major companies, right? So like early 90s and like early 2000s, you see every Stussy collab with Nike, you know?
Oh, yeah, dude,
like
always.
Every type
so
of
many,
shoe.
you can't
SB
even count.
Dunks, fucking Blazers, everything. Air Maxes.
Yeah, like
you
even
know?
like trail shoes. I remember they did, you know the shoe the trainer renders?
Yeah.
My brother has a Stussy pair of those. They're like black and Volt, and I think like 3M too.
And it's like a gradient Volt kind
yeah,
of.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
They were doing trainer indoors when they were like super under the radar. Like it's something about them knowing what's going on and sort of like I said, because they are grandfathered into this thing and because they are the pioneers, they think that they can bring, you know, anything from left field and be like, look, like it doesn't matter if it's cool or if it's currently in trend. You know, we've been in this game. We know what we like, and people are gonna fuck with it if they fuck with us. And
and I think that's another reason why they're so timeless, even in 2017, is because they've had like so much tenure in this game. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Like, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that Stussy is, if not the greatest streetwear brand of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, even was it Ben?
Bobby Hundreds.
Bobby Hundreds.
Even quoted that as the greatest streetwear brand of all time, and I definitely think so. And I think it's a good brand to sort of start off with in this, like, as we go along with these episodes and trying to cover each, you know, streetwear brand that's ever meant anything to anybody, and sort of the history of that brand to where it is now. I'd say this is a good one to start with because it really did pioneer what some of your and my, you know, streetwear influences sort of got their influences from.
Yeah.
In terms of design, release process, you know, making limited shit like you spoke to. And I think that's the great sort of brand to start with.
And I think another thing why it's so popular and it's so successful is because it does a really good job of bridging the gaps between different subcultures. Ooh. So we were talking about like reggae, hip hop, skating, surfing. Yeah. Like all of these might seem unrelated, but through streetwear, I think that's it's
all
big,
the same.
Yeah, it makes all of them stick together.
Yeah.
So I think that's another reason why they're so successful.
Because like to your point, think about all the different niche groups that come and gravitate towards that, right? So some of the most popular, if you've ever looked at like a collection from Stussy, is you see the sort of it'd be like an expanded stick figure holding a surfboard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's that. There's the Rasta lion.
Yeah.
That's another popular one. And then there's always like the skateboarder on the skateboard like graphic. Like and then all the other like collage type graphics always sort of mimic, you know, the cultures that Stussy sort of lives in terms of their stores and the cities that sort of represent them well. And it's something that you see a lot in their graphics.
Yeah, and I mean that plays into them appealing to a multitude of subcultures, niche groups, like we were saying, like maybe like it's the hip hop heads or like the b-boys or people who are into reggae or surfers, things like that. I think that's why they're so successful, is because they're able to appeal to not just one specific type of group, but almost like everybody, you know?
Oh yeah,
like
definitely.
In some way, I feel like you can relate to a Stussy piece out there. Like there's a Stussy piece out there that if you look at it, like it would resonate with you.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's any person could.
Like just recently, like something that they had just produced this season, we saw something that had a pair of dice on it, and I was like, dude, that's us right there.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I'm surprised we didn't make something like that. And it goes to show that really anybody can relate to a streetwear brand like that. And what's funny to me, and something that I don't think a lot of brands do, is the brands tend to tailor their message after a certain amount of years to their consumers and what they like, right? Yeah. I think something like Stussy, and why we think it's so cool to this day, and why even some of, you know, the head honchos in streetwear think Stussy is so cool to this day, is because they don't change.
Yeah, they're commercial, but I don't think that they sold out in a sense.
Exactly.
You know? Like their core DNA is still the same. They might be sold in like Zoomies or PacSun or whatever stores, but at the end of the day, their identity is still pretty much the same as it was, you know, back in the 80s, 90s, whatever. So I think that's another reason why that they're so successful.
And I think that's a good point, because we always misconstrue selling out when it comes to, you see a brand that's sort of like specific to a certain type of clothing they release, and then all of a sudden they start, like for example, 5 years ago when every brand started releasing bucket hats. Yeah. Right? And then next thing you know, you see them all releasing tie-dye. And then you see the sort of off-printed pocket t-shirts. And you know, like you can tell that they're attaching themselves to some trend, but it's very obvious for a lot of companies when they are sort of born off of a trend, right? Yeah. But when you're a brand like Stussy, to be honest, you'd be stupid not to make bucket hats in 2009 or 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Who wouldn't capitalize off something like that?
And I think Stussy does still do a lot of like the trendier stuff. Yeah. Like they will latch on to certain trends, but they still do it very successfully, you know? Like it's not as watered down as you'd see from other brands, you know?
Yeah.
So I think they do a good job of mixing both stuff that's trendy and very in fashion right now with stuff that they've always been doing, like the graphic tee, like all the shit that they've done in the past and they continue to do, you know?
And you want to know what's funny is when you say something like Stussy and you kind of see how they've lived in the United States, right? Like they're a guaranteed classic here. I always had this idea that if you're a streetwear brand and you can successfully live in Japan and continue to live in Japan without your marketing initiatives or advertising or, you know, Instagram content even being pushed towards a target audience in Japan, that's how you know that you're a core streetwear
That's how you know you made it.
That's how you know, right? Because you look, I've gone into thrift stores in Japan, and you walk in there and all you see is, you know, Stussy from the 90s. You see Bape from early 2000s, and it's like they appreciate what these brands made. And it's almost in a sense like, if it's kind of weird to say, but if the Japanese sort of streetwear population or the trendy groups in Japan, if they're wearing your shit from the early 90s or, you know, mid 2000s, you are classic.
Yeah, I mean,
or like, a true American streetwear brand, you know?
I mean, the Japanese are like the ultimate purveyors of like what is cool, you know? And I think just people in Japan have such a deep appreciation for the meaning behind these brands and how influential and how much impact they've had on culture, like pop culture and even society as a whole. So I think the Japanese are really good at keying in on that sort of thing. So,
and the great thing about that is they understand the difference between celebrity and like creator, right? Yeah. So when it comes to like, and you probably know of the names better than I do, but like the creators of Comme des Garçons or Junior Watanabe, if I pronounced that right, or like
that's his name, but anyways,
or even a Supreme or a Stussy, you know, like they are very well aware of who these people are, the people in charge of that. They understand that, you know, a person that's just famous wearing the clothing isn't as exciting as seeing, you know, your shoe get signed by a Murakami or a Stash, or, you know, like they appreciate the process behind all of these clothings a lot more than I think that, you know,
people
the
in the US
population in America does.
No, yeah, for sure.
You know damn well we would not be able to distinguish a Sean Stussy on the street between anybody else.
I mean, he looks like
He looks like everybody else.
No, I don't know. Last time I saw a picture of him, he kind of looked like the Big Lebowski. You haven't seen that movie?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it's because we take streetwear so for granted here in the United States.
Definitely.
You know, like it's always been a part of pop culture. I mean, as long as we've been alive.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of take that for granted. And I think in Japan, like the streetwear scene didn't really come up until, I don't want to say very recently, but within like the past 20 or so years, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there it's much more, it's held in much higher esteem because it's a lot newer, you know?
I think we have to start holding the term streetwear like and treat it more precious, you know, because when we look at like just streetwear brands produced in America and how often they're like brands, quote unquote brands are produced.
Yeah.
Or just t-shirt lines, or, you know, these bullshit Instagram things that always try to use hashtags and get us to follow them and do free
AKA us.
All that bullshit, you know, not us. We're not a streetwear brand.
But
we're a streetwear podcast. But yeah, like you see all these brands, those aren't streetwear brands. These are just, I don't even know what to call them.
They're just clothing brands.
Clothing brands, you know what I mean? I feel like if you're gonna call yourself a streetwear brand that makes clothing, you have to almost understand the past. You have to understand the Mount Rushmore. You know what I mean? Like you have to learn that shit, and I think that's important to sort of jumping into the whole thing. And you ever hear the debate nowadays about how like young rappers nowadays don't know who the fuck Biggie and Tupac is, and there's like a lot of criticism amongst these rappers because it's like you're not a real rapper if you've never listened to the gods of rap. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's sort of the same in terms of streetwear.
I mean, it's the same in anything. You know? It's like if you're not paying homage to, or if you're not even recognizing the talent of the people who came before you, the people who kind of pioneered or paved the way for what you're doing, then, you know, your brand just doesn't seem authentic to most people, you know? It just seems like you're there to make your quick buck and that's it.
Dude,
you know?
Exactly the point.
It seems like with a lot of brands these days is that they don't have respect for the process that a lot of older brands had to go through.
The process is important.
You know? Yeah.
Respect the process.
Trust the process.
Trust the process, you know? And that's super important because it's almost like, well, the word's not gentrified, but you're kind of taking
streetwear gentrification. Listen to that episode.
What episode was that? 34? Whatever.
I don't know. Whatever it is.
But yeah, you're almost like taking advantage of it. You know, you're taking advantage of a moment, and streetwear is less about the moment and more about a lifestyle, like your whole entire life.
For sure. That,
you know?
Yeah, that was just a gem you just said there. It's less about what's going on it is about what's going on in the moment.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
it's less
in terms of like
that.
what you put out. Okay, so like a graphic, right? I'm putting out a graphic to capture what's happening with the presidential election.
Yeah.
Cool, fine. But if your whole brand is surrounded by this current presidential election, who are you in 10 years? Because that presidential election no longer exists.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a thing of the past.
Yeah.
So it does make sense to like capture a moment. That's fine. You could do that in a whole collection. Some brands do that in a whole collection.
Mm-hmm.
They have a whole thing dedicated to, you know, anti-whoever, you know, but then they keep on going with scheduled programming. You know what I mean? They make what they're known to make.
Yeah, and I think that's an example of what Stussy is. Like I said earlier, I think that they're good at capturing kind of the feeling of the moment, the zeitgeist, if you will.
Wow.
If you didn't know that word, look it up. But yeah, they're good at capturing the feeling of that moment and using that to kind of influence the design of their products, whatever they're doing at the time. But like we were saying, at the end of the day, after all is said and done, it's back to regularly scheduled programming.
Exactly, you know? Exactly. So let's talk about a little bit of something that we didn't cover and sort of really dive deep and observe sort of Stussy within other cultures. So like we talked about sort of Stussy's huge impact in terms of Japan. And one of the things that I thought, like I just realized right now, is with sort of the widespread technology in terms of social media reaching out to everybody, right? So your brand is visible to London to New York to Los Angeles to Japan, whatever, right?
Yeah.
I feel like brands nowadays have to be able to sort of live in all these different cultures to be successful. And I mean successful in the point of affecting streetwear. Because streetwear isn't just, San Francisco in 2007.
Yeah.
It's not just that sort of hub.
It's
anymore.
literally everywhere.
It's the entire world, or at least where larger fashion, areas, major metropolitan cities for the most part. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I mean, even like rural areas.
Yeah, that's a hard word.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not gonna lie.
But yeah, I mean, like we keep on saying, with the advent of the internet and accessibility reaching all-time highs, streetwear isn't just in huge metropolitan areas anymore. It's literally everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It's in your Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's in your Austin, Texas. It's in fucking Hawaii. You know what I mean? So when we look at something like a Stussy, and one of the things that I always thought that was great about them, and you tell me if you see it differently, you imagine a Stussy in a London, right? Mm-hmm. They got all the clothes that you think a person in London would wear, or in England, a tracksuit, the side bags. They've always made side bags. You know what I mean? They have the camos, anything that you could think of, right? It fits there. They have
for sure
the cardigans, like the everything. Then you look at a New York, right? You got the Letterman jackets, you got the furs, you got the big logo
you got
stuff.
The fitted hats.
Exactly, bucket hats, all that stuff. And you look at a Japan, you have fucking a shit ton of accessories. They fuck with that out there. You have the big pants, it works everywhere.
Yeah.
I feel like to be a successful brand today, you have to be able to show that you don't just work in the city that you created in, but you work globally.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem with a lot of other brands these days, is that they only work in certain places. Like they only work in their own specific localities. Like they're not able to live, let's say, abroad in like a London, And I think that's a big part of why Stussy is so appealing.
Yeah.
Is because literally anyone can wear it.
That's
if you
true.
think about it. Like, I'm thinking about it right now, and I'm thinking like my 52-year-old dad could wear some of like the pieces there, and he would look totally normal.
Fine.
In it. Yeah, like
Completely
he wouldn't
fine.
look out of place, So I think that's a huge. Actually, I don't even know how old my dad is. 52, something like that.
I don't know my parents.
I know his birth. Okay. If you're listening, I'm sorry. But anyways, but yeah, I think that's part of the huge appeal of Stussy, is that literally anyone and everyone can attach themselves to it.
Exactly. And it works for them.
Yeah.
Which is the biggest thing. And you got to imagine like a brand like a Hundreds, and I like to use them in sort of comparison with each other, because the Hundreds is probably the closest brand as of recently to have such a huge impact on streetwear.
You think so?
I think so.
Not even like a Supreme or...
No, okay, well, I mean, Supreme and Stussy kind of fall into the same category as being sort of the early adopters of what is
you're talking about brands like that were
like,
founded recently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because everything as of recent are all stepchilds of like a Hundreds and a Diamond and
what about like Huff
and a Black Scale and a Huff. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So like you look at a Hundreds and you stack it up against a Stussy in terms of could the Hundreds potentially be a modern Stussy, and you just think like, I don't know, people are wearing Hundreds in Japan, They
are actually.
I'm sure they are, but not to the extent where it works.
Not to the extent where it's like huge out there, like you'll see it in every shop.
Yeah. Of course, everything, a bunch of Hundred shit is bootlegged out there, but it's a little bit different to say like everybody knows like. They're not looking for vintage Hundreds in the thrift store, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have that big of a cultural impact yet. But, like, one brand that is currently sort of going into that trend, and I think they're probably one of the more true-to-self brands as of recently, which is weird because we do see them in the Zoomies and all of the, skate shops and all that stuff, is a Huff.
Yeah.
I mean... We went into their store in LA recently.
Yeah, both times we went to LA.
Like super well curated. We still get excited about their clothing to this day.
I remember I was looking around, I was like, oh shit, like this stuff is tight.
Is cool.
Yeah,
you know?
I would wear this now.
And it's definitely something. They do have a shop in Osaka.
Yeah.
And the culture, it just fits in the culture. Maybe one day I can sort of imagine it when you say like a Europe or an England, or you know what I mean? You think of Huff, but it's not to that extent yet.
Yeah.
But you can definitely start to see it in like a New York, in LA, in SF, in Japan. So I think that's one of the closest ones to sort of gain and garner that top spot of like turn it into like a more timeless streetwear brand.
No, yeah, for sure. I think Huff is and was one of the huge players within like the early mid 2000s going into like the late 2000s 2010s because they were doing a pretty similar thing to Stussy. Like they were doing stuff that was like very marketable, very appealing to people outside of like skating. Like I remember my brother used to go there to cop like Vans like all the time when they used to come out with like the early days of like Vans Vault shit like that. He would go there to cop Vans.
Everything there.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like sneakers or whatever in general. So I think that's another reason why brands like Huff and Stussy are still relevant.
You want to know what's crazy? And just reading and watching interviews of Keith and Sean is a lot of their inspiration comes from trips to Japan.
Yeah.
Because I think even before they were big, or, you know, when they were still in the works of becoming, you know, to what they are now, there was the Atmos, which was out there. And that was a huge inspiration for how they curate their brand and come off as a brand to, you know, a public and generate a cult-like following. So it's just interesting to see like the comparison and how the U.S. builds off Japan, Japan builds off the U.S.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that we talk about all the time. Is that Japan and the U.S. are always so very closely linked in terms of street culture, pop culture in general. I think we both feed off of each other. And yeah.
So so right now, as of right now, what do you think of this sort of trajectory Stussy is going in? Do you think they're just gonna, you know, sort of level out, play it easy, sort of bite off of the trends that pop up, or you think at some point, you know, they're gonna start doing something different?
I don't think that they're gonna expand on a huge level like we see a Supreme doing like a Louis Vuitton collection or something like that. At least not anytime soon within the next, you know, handful of years. But I think that they're still gonna continue to do their thing. They're kind of at a good place right now, like I was saying, where they can basically do whatever they want. They can latch onto trends and, you know, incorporate those successfully, or they can, you know, continue to do their own thing with their graphic heavy stuff, tees, hoodies, whatever it may be, you know? I don't think they're going away anytime soon, but I also don't think that they're going to, you know, blow up and be as huge as they were. You know?
They're not going to have like an overnight just like holy shit,
like Stussy, exactly. I think they're just going to remain at the level that they're at, which isn't necessarily a bad thing considering that they're like super fucking successful.
And I want to keep the price down.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to pay Supreme prices for things.
People don't resell Stussy, so we're good off of that. But I think to your point, I think that they're at a really good place right now, and I think the name Stussy is still worth something nowadays.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And I think that when it comes to the name Stussy, there's no sort of off the top of your head, nothing immediately tied to it. You think of Stussy, you kind of like you're kind of lost for a second. You know, like
what do you mean?
You don't think of anything in particular. When you think of a Supreme, you think of skateboarding.
Yeah.
Or like a box logo, right? When you think of Stussy, you think of a streetwear brand. So when you see a Stussy, you know, logo on a pair of track pants, you see a Stussy logo on a bucket hat, you see it on a fur coat, you see it on an all over flower print t-shirt or a button up, you think, well, that's just Stussy. Like, you don't ever think that it's out, sort of going outside of the boundaries of what it's capable of doing, which I think is really cool.
You can't really associate it with anything
exactly.
else. It's very much just itself.
That's basically what I just said in a nutshell. So I just kind of
except more eloquently,
more definitely more succinct,
articulately.
But I think it's definitely something that is going to continue to sort of progressively, I think, create this stuff that their loyal fans, you know, fell in love with. And I personally still sort of look at what they do, and I mean, their lookbooks are still sort of subpar from time to time, but they do put out great clothing all the time. I think that them being in an Urban Outfitters is a pretty good look. It's not like it's anything crazy.
It's not the worst thing.
It's not the worst thing. Yeah. They could do way worse. I'm pretty sure they're in Azumis, but it's still like those core pieces that we sort of, when we look at them, we know, like, all right, that's never going to be in Azumis. That's never going to be in an Urban Outfitters. You know, the tour T-shirts that say all the cities with the big S logo on it. I've never seen that in another store.
I'm pretty sure that they have those, but
I think I've seen that in Azumis actually. Okay, well anyways, there's some of those that are always still very coveted. I remember seeing the Hayes one that was always really popular.
Yeah.
And then obviously the Stussy International Tribe Lettermans are always going to be super coveted. So there is a sense of exclusivity with the brand still that I think every brand needs to have, and it can't just be surrounded around collaborations. Because if you just rely on collaborations, then shit, what are you when you're not doing them? You know what I mean?
Very true.
And I think we did a pretty good job at sort of honing in on an individual brand this time. We did mention a lot of other brands, but I think when it comes to a brand like Stussy and it comes to just sort of deep diving into a brand, they get a lot of influence from other brands. So
it's hard not to discuss other brands when talking about Stussy, because Stussy was so influential.
Yeah.
It was essentially one of the originators of what we call streetwear now. So.
And streetwear is a community. So it's hard to talk about an individual person and act like they're within their own sort of bubble without talking about everybody else, because everybody has an impact on, you know, streetwear. I think that was a great episode, and we definitely sort of hit the nail on the head of just sort of cracking down on a little bit of everything. We didn't cover a lot of the history, but I think, you know, do your research. You know, the whole point of this is...
you bums.
Exactly. The whole point of this is for us to provide our insight in sort of what we see and the sort of trends we see Stussy sort of going into. And it's your job as listeners to do the research, you know. Think about what you're wearing. Think about why you're wearing it. That's the sort of reason why we started this podcast.
Yeah, and I think that's a wrap for episode 13.
Yeah.
It's 13 now? Yeah.
Episode 13. Don't forget, follow, subscribe, like, leave a comment.
Ask us questions.
Yeah.
Whatever.
If you're listening to this, even it takes 1 second to give us 5-star review on fucking Apple Podcasts, or even leave like a generic ass comment on our SoundCloud. It's really that easy. So if you are listening up to the end of this episode and you do hear me say that, please do that. And
we will appreciate that.
Definitely. Shout out to you guys. Episode 13. We out.
Peace.